Coming to you from the city where the legal penalty for jumping off a building is death, it's Ventriloquism Weekly. Hello again on this Monday, April 14th, 2014. I'm Matt Bailey, and I got to tell you, we have such a unique and such a different interview for you today. It was so cool to get to talk to Marty Hahne, a magician from the Branson, Missouri area. Those of you may remember that in the summer of 2013, he was the target of a ridiculous federal law that required he have a 60-page disaster plan for his rabbit. Hahne immediately took to Facebook to write just one post, just to have a laugh among fellow entertainers that are his friends, and it caught on fire and eventually caused the federal law to be stayed. That's right, he changed federal law. One man and his rabbit. He's here to tell us all about what he's learned from that experience and doing the media circuit once that post took off. And he wants us to know there are certain things we can learn from his experience. And I'm excited about the interview because I got to feel important because I used words like government and over-regulation, and maybe CNN will hire me. I don't know. I'm just kidding. It was just such a fun, different interview to do. And Marty really has a lot to talk about. So we're going to get right to it. Here now, our interview with Marty Hahne. Marty Hahne, welcome to the program. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you today?
I am doing great. I am really, really excited to get to talk to you about this whole rabbit disaster sort of follow-up. We're a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, just a little bit removed from all the hubbub about that. So it's great to be able to sit down and talk it over, entertainer to entertainer, and to put this out there for everyone to hear about. So if you could give us a bit of a summary of how one social post got federal government policy changed.
It's amazing what happens with social media nowadays. The internet is the new sheriff in town, I always say. and from getting a ridiculous request from the USDA to write a disaster plan for my rabbit, I got that request on a Thursday evening and just put a funny post up about it on Facebook, and it just went from one person to the next, and by Saturday, just 2 days later, it was just had gone viral and was showing up everywhere, from National Review to several bloggers, all the way up to Glenn Beck. And by Sunday morning, I was being seen on national television on Fox and Friends. So just from Thursday night, by Sunday morning, I was already on national television without even knowing it. Fox and Friends took some of my video off my YouTube channel and started talking about this rabbit disaster plan story, and from there, it went to the Washington Post, and from there, it went to John Stossel. And in the meantime, the federal government decided to back down. So it's amazing how quickly things can happen nowadays.
Yeah, it got all the way to the Secretary of Agriculture, a cabinet position.
Exactly, yes, the top man at the USDA, and he, I don't think, was even aware of this crazy regulation. The Washington Post reporter kind of told me off the record that the Secretary of Agriculture was very upset about this, and I think he was instrumental in making things happen very quickly.
That's great. And on behalf of all entertainers everywhere, we thank you for bringing this to light. And what I want to start off with is, why do you think, other than just the nature of it being a story of government overregulation, that the story of an entertainer being affected, what do you think struck the core of America that everyone picked it up? What do you think fundamentally about this story?
Yeah, they really, in all the stories, portrayed me as a children's entertainer and kind of and which is what I primarily am. Probably about 70 to 80% of my programs are school assemblies and libraries, children's type shows, festivals. But I think the fact that I wasn't a David Copperfield or a mega multi-million-dollar type person, I was more of a little guy just trying to entertain kids, and that really struck a chord with people. And then and there's this huge government agency worrying about 1 3-pound rabbit that some children's entertainer has. I wasn't a circus with exotic animals. I wasn't a zoo with exotic animals. Just one little guy with one little rabbit. Just trying to have fun with some shows and cheer up some kids. And I think that really kind of struck a chord with people.
Why do you think this whole thing even existed for entertainers and for people who use livestock as more than just pets? Why do you think, what was the original intent of that law?
Way back this actually started off as a rule involving research animals back in the 60s. And someone had their dog kidnapped, a Dalmatian, and ended up in a research lab. And so they started thinking they need to have some regulations on research animals, and then in the 70s it expanded to circuses and zoos, and the way the law is written, even a magician with one rabbit could be classified as what they call an exhibitor. And I believe what the USDA has, quite a few inspectors. They increased their budget, hired more inspectors. Some of the circuses have gone out of business, and I believe they just basically needed more work to do to try to justify their jobs and their budgets. So they a few years ago made a decision to start going after lower level people such as myself.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the inspectors said they would look in parent magazine ads for magicians that have pictures holding a rabbit. They'll go on the internet and just start looking for magicians' websites, and anywhere they see a magician with a rabbit, then they may be calling on you.
Is there a government bias in either direction towards entertainers? Did that kind of come to light? Is there an issue that our government system has with performers?
Not really. It's just that the USDA basically, they cover everything from puppy breeders and not just entertainers, but all types of people that are involved with animals. And but like I said, so many circuses have gone out of business, and they really, but anytime you're at a state fair or a county fair, you can pretty much count on the fact that you will see a USDA inspector, doing their job at the fair as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that seems to me like they pretty much go ahead and try to enforce the laws against anyone they can, whether they're an entertainer or not.
So, and it is important they do their jobs, but sometimes that hammer comes down way too hard, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm inspected every year at my home. It's inspected. In fact, I just had one maybe 2 weeks ago, and where they knock on my door, and I have to let them come into my home and inspect my home and check on the rabbit. And it's like a surprise inspection, just interrupts my day, and I have to take my rabbit to the vet once a year, and of course the vet has paperwork to fill out. I have to apply for my license every year and fill out paperwork for that and pay $40. And so it does seem to be a bit much, but the real thing that broke the straw that broke the camel's back was when last summer they added a new requirement that I had to have a written disaster plan on how I would deal with my rabbit in a fire, a flood, a tornado, an ice storm, hurricane, civil unrest. And there were five major points with about 20 bullet points under each thing, with all the facts and pointers that had to be covered in this disaster plan, and that was the part that just finally got so ridiculous, and I was able to get a stay in that role, and so now they're trying to figure out how to rewrite this disaster plan requirement.
So what was it like when you were throughout that process and you were suddenly thrust into this role as an advocate, not only for just these stupid laws that nobody pays attention to, but for entertainers and making it aware that entertainers, making the government and the people aware that entertainers are just like everybody else and they have to deal with sometimes these really ridiculous things and becoming an advocate for the entertainment community? What was that like?
Yeah. Initially it happened so quickly when I saw it was on Fox and Friends on that Sunday morning after just putting a Facebook post up on a Thursday night, and it happened so quickly. I was actually a little bit nervous. I thought, I'm probably going to be audited. They're going to try to come after me. And about 2 days later, as a matter of fact, my phone rang and the caller ID said federal government, Washington, D.C., and I answered the phone, and it was one of the higher-ups from the USDA personally calling me. to discuss the concerns. She said, "I understand you have some concerns about this rule," and of course I told her all my concerns, and she tried to empathize with me, but every concern ended with, "Well, we understand how you feel. However, it's the rule, and if you don't do it, we will fine you." And
well, must not have been the higher up, because fast forward a couple of months later.
Yeah, and then and little did she know that the same day she called me, I had just finished the interview with the Washington Post, and that Washington Post reporter was actually going to be flying to my home like 2 days after that. And I thought, lady, you have no idea what's coming up here in the next week or so. And I told her at the time, I said, now you must be calling me because you saw the TV appearance on Fox and Friends, or maybe you heard about it on Rush Limbaugh or something. And the publicity doesn't bother us at all, she said. We get attacked all the time, and we're not concerned about that at all. And I was thinking, well, you called me, lady. I didn't call you, so you must be concerned about it a little bit,
Right, and we could get into how the government with Fox News and their relationship, but that's a whole other conversation. But really, and right on the heels of this, you appeared at Van Haven last year. And it was just so interesting to hear that story. And what was it like to hear the response back from entertainers that I'm sure were so appreciative of getting this out there and kind of one win for us, Yeah,
that was the best part of the whole thing. The support I got from so many entertainers on Facebook, and in fact, when I was emceeing the show at Van Haven and got to tell the story that night, that was the actual day the story had just hit the Washington Post, and that day I was hardly even around the convention because I was doing so many radio interviews, and my phone was just going crazy with people calling me. Senator Roy Blunt's office called me. Another congresswoman called me, and it was just a crazy day, and I just barely had enough time to run down and MC that show. And when I told the story, and the response just was so gratifying, it just really made my day. How much support the people gave me. I just couldn't appreciate, couldn't have said it enough how wonderful that was.
And I think it goes to the image of the magician and the ventriloquist and the family entertainer as sort of an immovable part of the American kind of landscape, that there will always be these people who do this, these entertainers, and there will always be a place for them in our society, and we need to stick up for each other, and sometimes the rest of America has to have our back as well. So that was great to see from that side, to see people like John Stossel and Glenn Beck coming to your defense, because not in doing so, they were not only coming to your defense, they were coming to everybody else's in this community as well.
And it's real gratifying, too, all the stories that have been online about this, and people leave comments after the stories, and it's probably 95%, maybe 98% in favor, and just 1 or 2% that may not be in favor, So when this all initially started, I thought, maybe people are going to attack me and say, "What's wrong? Don't you like animals? What's wrong with you?" But it's just vastly, overwhelmingly in support. So that's been just so gratifying to see.
Yes, and of course, got to know this is I like to call this a bit of a trade show between entertainer and entertainer. Did you see a bump in shows after that? Little publicity, little bump in bookings.
But you know what? It really hasn't translated into that great of a bump for me. Although there's probably ways for me to use this publicity to my advantage. Maybe I've been a little bit lax in that as well. But I have been booked at several magic conventions, kind of like the story told at Van Haven. I now actually have a PowerPoint presentation that goes with it, and I'll be at the International Band of Magicians in Canton, Ohio, here the first week of May, and doing a presentation. And I was at another conference in New Jersey recently, and so that's really fun. Magicians still want to hear the story, and the story. This one, I think it's about ready to die. Something else happens, and now I just found out the other week that I've just made the April edition of the Reader's Digest magazine. So there you go.
That's cool. It's one of those things that it will come up like, and I know I tried to, and I know just tell our listeners, last semester when we were here at school, I think I messaged you in like October. I was like, "Hey, do you want to come on?" And things were still nuts for you. So
Right.
it really took it took a while, and I'm glad we have you here today, and I'm glad we are as removed from it as we are, even though you're still seeing things from it, because then we can look back and we can analyze and see what it is, and it's the story that won't go away because it's important. It's very important, not only to us but to America in general, as a picture of just government being stupid.
Right. Yeah. In fact, that's the title of the Reader's Digest article. I believe it's something about stupid politicians is the name of the article. So, and the thing that the really interesting thing to note is never sent out a press release. I never went to any people. All these people came to me. It was just like a train that left the station and it took off. And I mean, the Reader's Digest, I had no idea that was even going to run in the Reader's Digest. My sister just happened to get the magazine and called me, and you know, and I would have got an email from someone, oh, you're a question on the NPR game show. Wait, don't tell me. And I'm like, really? And so I got that audio, and yes, everything's happened. Really, just people just hearing about it through the internet. I haven't tried to publicize it at all, and it's just happened.
Did you ever find out who responded to that social post sort of first to get that ball rolling?
There's a conservative blogger by the name of Bob McCarty out of St. Louis, and he really is the one that is well connected. He had done another rabbit story, not about an entertainer, but a man that was raising rabbits, and so he kind of was interested in the USDA and these rabbits, and then he heard about my story, and so he and I became Facebook friends, and whenever I'd have an inspection, I would just post something about, well, I passed my inspection today, or they did this today, or I've got a new inspector, or whatever. And so when this happened, I thought, I'll put this on my Facebook page, and Bob happened to see it there, and I didn't realize how well connected he was, but once it went to Bob McCarty's Facebook page, it just exploded overnight. Now, Friday night's not a good night to break a news story, but he had it on Friday night, and by Saturday, it was just going crazy.
And what was your reaction? I mean, it wasn't like you were trying to get the word out and just nag people. You wanted to be funny. You wanted to vent, as people often do on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So what was your reaction Saturday morning when your phone was blowing up and things were just going nuts?
That Saturday I had 3 shows, and I went to as I was going out, I checked Facebook, and my personal post that I put up had over 100 comments on it, mostly other magicians. So I said, oh, this is hitting the core with everybody, but we're all magician friends, so didn't think too much of it. And then after my first show, I checked my phone, and Bob McCarty said, hey, we just made it to Iowa Hawk. He's a pretty big guy called Iowa Hawk. And then I did another show, and Bob sent me another thing. He said, hey, it just made it over to this other guy, Anthony Burge. And then he said, hey, wait a minute, you just made it to Mark Stein on National Review, and he's the guest host on Rush Limbaugh. And then I did the third show, and I looked, and he's like, he said, Marty, I think my job is done. You've made it to the Blaze, Glenn Beck. So, and my head was just spinning, and like I said, it was exciting, but there was also, I must admit, I was a little bit scared. I didn't know where it was going to go, what was going to happen, what the ramifications were going to be. Were they going to really come down hard on me? But fortunately, the support and the wave of publicity was just so strong that the USDA had enough of it and wanted to get out of this as quick as they could.
Yeah, that's great. And it's funny you mentioned that they weren't intimidated by the press, that they said they weren't intimidated by the press, but they called you. So it's really neat, the insight that you get when you are a factor for change. It's really interesting what they try to perceive and what is the truth. And again, I don't like to get uber political on this show, but that's just such interesting insight from that side of it.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, the supervisor who called me, I of course copied down her number. So then when the agricultural secretary said that he wanted to issue a stay in this rule, I thought, well, I haven't heard this directly, so I know the lady that called me to ask me about my concerns, I'll call her. And of course, I called her and left messages and called, and she never would even talk to me. So, and so finally, the next day, she must have told someone, and it's the man that signs the paperwork, one of the highest people there is in the USDA, personally called me on the phone then the next day to tell me, yes, you are correct, we've issued a stay in the rule, and we've changed the Federal Register. It'll be on the register tomorrow morning. Thank you. Goodbye.
That's amazing. And it's just, it really goes to show that anybody, if you're put in a situation and you have the means to get it out there, anybody can affect change in this government, and there still is hope, because
Yeah.
so many times we hear, oh, government doesn't listen to us, we can't do it. You cause a big enough roar, or the roar causes it itself, because you did just one and it all exploded, it will happen.
Yeah, this rule to have a disaster plan, it took 7 years to write the rule, and they did public meetings on this, which, most people never even have heard about these public meetings, but they had public meetings. They took 995 public comments, and only 50 people were in favor of the rule. 945 were against the rule, and they still passed it. And so it took 7 years to write. They went ahead and passed it, even though so many people objected. But with a magician and a rabbit and a little magic, we were able to get it shut down. So
yes, true magic, and that's just. So, what's your rabbit's name again?
Casey, the most famous rabbit in America, I think.
Casey, the most famous rabbit in America. I bet he's sitting pretty for.
Oh yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah. It's when I saw a Congresswoman, Vicky Hertzler, on the floor of the House speaking about this. On C-SPAN, I thought, wow, that's really something. A little magician from a small town in Missouri, basically entertaining children, is now being talked about on the floor in Washington, D.C. That was really something.
What's the one thing you hope fellow entertainers learned from your experience?
Well, I always say, no matter where you are in the entertainment field, I just think everybody is important, and I don't care if you're just doing birthday party shows, or if you're doing corporate shows, or your casino work, or what you are. I just hope that this story will just show you that everybody's important. We can all get our voices heard, and I hate when people, other entertainers, say, I just do birthday parties, or I just do this. And I say every show is important. I mean, I can tell you numerous stories of lower level, what I call like a lower level type show, where something just tremendous will happen. Maybe I was doing a show at Halloween, shortly before Halloween several years ago. In fact, it was the year of 9/11. And that show was in October, and it was just a typical Halloween party for kids, not what you think is a major, big, important event. But every show is important. You do your best job at every show. And sure enough, a lady and her little girl came up and said, she said, my sister was killed in 9/11, and she said that happened 7 weeks ago, and she said today was the first day I've laughed since that happened. And here I was, thinking I'm just doing a not that important show, and here I made a huge impact on this lady. First time she laughed in 7 weeks. And so that's the thing. I hope this story kind of shows people that even the little guy can ensure the voice is heard, but more importantly than that, we all have a job to do. We have to do our very best job. You never know who's out there listening to our message.
Absolutely. Well, Marty Hahn, thank you so much for being on the program, and more than that, thank you for your work on behalf of entertainers, and thank you for being an entertainer. You are a one-of-a-kind, true class, and I thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, man, that's certainly kind words coming from you, and we sure appreciate being on the program today. Thanks so very much.
Thank you. Thank you again to Marty Hahn for coming on and sharing such an awesome, unique story, something we could all learn from about how we can make a difference in this world. Well, I want to wish all of you who celebrate a happy Passover tomorrow, because today's Monday the 14th, and tomorrow is Passover, so if you are listening before then, happy Passover. And also, if you celebrate this coming Sunday, I want to wish you guys a happy Easter as well. And we will be back next Monday with Mark Wade. He will be on the program to come and talk about Van Haven. We're getting really, really down to the wire, especially for that early registration. Endings is very soon. And the actual convention will be here quicker than you know it. It's incredible. how time flies. So I'm very excited to welcome Mark back to the program to talk about Vent Haven. That's going to be an awesome and exciting time next week, Monday the 21st. Well, that's it for us this week. Remember, you can find us in all the usual places on Facebook, and we're now on Twitter at Talk4Two. And you can find us at ventriloquismweekly.podomatic.com. That's ventriloquismweekly.podomatic.com. We are not on the website just yet. When we take our break on May 12th is our last episode for the season, and we're going to take a couple-week break just like we did in the winter. And during that time, I will be transitioning back home for the summer and getting everything up on that website so that when we launch again, we will be on the website for good. So I'm very excited about that. Well, signing off for Ventriloquism Weekly, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding all you vents out there to keep talking for two.